Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes at the Waltons. Today, I'm going to be answering more of your questions in a segment of Ask Judy. Please do hit like and subscribe if you are enjoying these various different segments. From West Valley, regarding actors blocking scenes, I observe that sometimes actors are not looking into another's eyes, but to the side, past their head into the distance. Is that true? Interesting. I wonder what the circumstances are where you felt that that's what it looked like. We always looked at each other. I know when I was doing scenes with actors, we looked at each other. If someone looked off, it might be because of an acting moment, something within the scene that made them reflective and glance away as we do in real life. So that's the type of thing that you sometimes associate with cue cards, and we never used cue cards. So I'm not quite sure. If you can mention a specific example of a scene or an episode that I can take a look at to see what you're talking about, maybe I can help. I know that when I spoke with Robert Woods, who played David Spencer, and he spent a lot of years doing soap operas, and he said, that they did often use cue cards simply because the sheer volume of dialogue they had to do every day. So he said in that case, the cue cards would be in various different places, and that they learned the art of, glancing over and looking at it, but not sneaking looks where it would be evident, because you don't want your eyes to be like shifting. Oh, I'm looking at my lines. I mean, the camera sees everything. It's sort of like if you're looking over here and you glance at the camera sees that. It isn't as if you can sneak a look at the camera and the camera won't see it. I do know, I just recently listened to one of Betty White's books, and she was talking about working on some show where there were cue cards, and she was struggling with it because it just felt so awkward and didn't want to have that sort of looking sneaky look eye thing. And that someone gave her a wonderful piece of advice on that and said, just do all of your dialogue, that they would put the cue cards, I think, just below or just above the actor's head. So it's sort of like, don't look at the actor, just look at the cards all the time, and that the other actor would be doing the same thing. So they would both look like they were looking in the same place, and that would become where the camera thought the person was that they were talking to. So things like that. There's various different things you can do that can make it seem less obvious. And I think the advances in technology, teleprompters, various different things like that, make it possible to not have to do things that are quite so evident. But I guess people who really know how to handle cue cards, from the side of presenting the cue cards to actors who have worked with them a lot, probably learn a lot of really good, useful tricks. So, but us, I do know that there was rare occasions, like sometimes if you'd done a scene, but then you needed to get a particular close-up, and where the camera needed to be for it to look like everything was in the same positions, there might be no room for me or for the actor that I was talking to really be where, if they needed to be there, and the camera's like right there might have been no room for them. So then sometimes we would be given a spot to talk to. So they'd say, okay, we'll look at that, just above that, not there, and you'd kind of set an eye line, and maybe they'd put a piece of tape there if you didn't have some particular guide. And so you would play all of your lines to that person off to a particular place, and you'd hear the voice coming from someplace else, but you'd just treat it as if that person was right there. So various different things, like little cheat type things like that would happen out of necessity. This next question is one that I get frequently, and I wish I could answer it better, but Barry Autry asked, I would like you to do a video about the music on the Waltons, and I would love to be able to do a video about the music on the Waltons, but I was never around it. Aside from the fact that we sometimes sang in scenes, in which case, if we didn't know the song, they came down, they taught it to us, and then we sang it. Sometimes, if it was like in church or something like that, it would just be done. We'd just do it live, or sometimes they would create a playback right there, and then they would play that and we'd sing along with it. But in terms of all of the wonderful composition work that was done, or a lot of the songs and things that John Walmsley did. Now, I did talk with John some about the music. So if you search on my channel for the segments with John Walmsley, there might be more information about the music. Alexander Courage was our composer for years on the Waltons. So he created much of the beautiful music that I'm sure you all refer to when you say, please talk about the music. He was just a wonderful composer and composed the theme and for Star Trek and any number of things. I have run across some wonderful YouTube videos about Alexander Courage. So you might try searching him, Alexander Courage. We knew him as Sandy Courage. I don't even know if I ever had the pleasure of meeting him. He may have come down to the set at some point, but I never went and had to do pre-recording of anything because they never let Mary Ellen sing on the show. She wasn't supposed to be able to sing, so I never got to. So I did some of the group stuff. Otherwise, so pretty much everything I did was just on set, whereas John Walmsley and some of the other people who did music in the show would go and they'd have a recording session. And Sandy, I expect, was there. And so I really wish I could tell you more, but most of that happened somewhere else, not on the set. And unfortunately, things that went on in post-production, I wasn't there. And Catherine Bellarose asked this question: how is money raised to fund a series and a movie? Can you explain the differences between a producer and executive producer? And how does an actor make the transition from actor to producer? First of all, how money is raised to fund a series is different, I think, than a movie. But I think there's a lot of ways it gets raised, and something that I'm not familiar enough with. I mean, there are private investors, but it depends on the budget. For a TV series, that is what the network does. The network provides a budget. Like, this is what my understanding was on the Waltons. CBS gave our producers, they said, here's your budget per episode. This is how much money you have to create an episode of the Waltons. If you use less, you can kind of use that towards another episode that costs more. If you spend more, you're gonna have to find it somewhere else. It's gonna come out of money you haven't spent earlier or out of your own pocket. And where the network gets the money from, we have commercials. So they are charging sponsors to run those commercials for those shows. So things like that. Now, of course, when you're doing the original production, it's all outlay of money. But then when you show reruns, there's no additional outlay of money because you already have that. So the rerun is where they can make an additional group, pile of money, so to speak, that then can help to have funded the original production or future episodes and things like that. And probably where then ultimately the producers, make their money or whatever. So things like that. I'm not exactly sure. I know we ran on a really tight budget for our show. With a movie, because it's not sponsorship, then, it might be money borrowed through some banks have funding sources, or, there might be private equity monies or funds or things like that. So somebody, which is usually the executive producer, is responsible for going and sourcing that money from wherever they can legally source it from. There are regulations on how they can source money. That's kind of on them. So executive producers usually are either people who brought together the money or someone who brought some other key piece to the puzzle. Sometimes you'll see that the stars of the show are also executive producers, and it might be because of what they brought. Sometimes it's what they bring creatively. So there's a lot of different things. And people who give money, if somebody puts up a bunch of money, then they might get an executive producer credit because they put up money. So executive producer can mean a number of things, particularly in film. In television, that is usually the person who made the deal and is, overseeing the financial aspects of the show. That's what it was at the point we were doing television. The producer is the one responsible for getting the actual creative product made. So they are pulling together all of the pieces, the crew, the cast, all of that to make sure that that money that they have now results in a product. So that's just the bare bones of the information. It gets pretty complicated, and people get credits for a lot of reasons. And nowadays you'll see tons of producers on shows, and a lot of times producers are also writers. A writer goes up in over the seasons, they keep getting new perks, and those perks become producer credits and stuff like that, because they're part of the creative team of the show. And then how does an actor make the transition from actor to producer? In many cases, it is just being willing to take on some of those responsibilities, whether it is taking the creative helm of something, whether it is bringing money to the table for a project. It's just it becomes more, rather than being a hired gun, so to speak, like, okay, I was brought in to act in a show. I'm not a producer. But if I, like one of the films, a film that I made, that I was a producer on, I brought some of the money to the table. I also, helped coordinate with the director and was involved in the casting of it, and just a lot of other factors like that. So it's a different degree of responsibility in terms of bringing together the pieces. So at any point, an actor can decide that they want to produce something, and you can start off with some little short film. I did that too with my little short Space Limbo, which is on my YouTube channel if you haven't seen it, and just something I wanted to make. So again, I put all the pieces together, including working out the contracts and things like that, the union stuff, all of it. So those are all pieces of producing, and you can just sort of make that choice and take it on. Or sometimes, as an actor is with a series for a longer period of time, they can negotiate a producer credit because they're probably more involved in decisions about the show and about their character and the direction of it and all of that. So again, it can be a long, involved, complicated thing, or it can be very simple. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Ask Judy. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons, more of your questions, and hopefully more special guests. Thanks for watching.